Okay, well, welcome back to the second part and the final part of the cottage build. In the first part of the build, what we did is we used a 3D printer to create a base for this, and we used polymer clays and a paper mache product to create the timbers and the stones and the stucco material that's on there. So the one thing I wanted to show you real quick was the window, the way I assembled it. And I've actually printed it in 3 pieces because I wanted to be able to easily mold them, and if you have all these pieces that have one flat end, you can mold them pretty easily and it fits right into the window. For the floorboards, what I used is a technique that I saw Dr. Faust's painting clinic do, where he took some styrene and scored it with a small hobby saw lengthwise along the board. So I used that to create some masters, and then I glued the masters together and then made a mold of them using a silicone molding compound. So then what I did is I just poured the resin into the mold to create my floorboards here. So I'm just dry fitting these right now. A little bit of sanding. The resin sands up pretty easily, and the floor is ready to be glued into the bottom part of the cottage. So I'm going to use a little bit of super glue to do that portion and be nice and solid in there. Now, the one thing I wanted to do is just take some black dye and put in here some black wash, just to show you how the floorboards really pop. It really gives you an idea of what the floorboards look like or will look like when they're painted up. But I wanted to figured it would really show good contrast with the white on and the black. The next part is going to be using a Scotty D 2.5D method for the walls. Well, I don't want the walls to be an inch or two high. I want them to be half an inch high, just to sort of say, okay, well, these are where the walls are located inside here. Now, it's a very simple structure that we're building here, so it's not going to have a very complex room structure. It's just one little room in this little hovel. But what I've done is I've cut the length of them, or cut the height at 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to insert them into the tray that I made on the 3D printer. And I'm using the same type of board that was scored for the floorboards too. So once they're painted up, they're really going to look pretty sharp. So the top fits on it, and that shows you once the walls have been up and in place. I didn't have the black wash on the walls inside there, but this will show you how it'll slide right into place like that. So this will give you an idea of what it looks all the way around. You can see the door, there's an opening for the door there, and the walls go up just to below the window, which is exactly where I want them. Now for the roof part, what I did is actually did a little bit of a mistake when I was making the roof. I printed the roof out on the 3D printer, and I didn't make it quite long enough. There wasn't, the eaves didn't overhang quite long enough. So what I'm doing here is I'm just artificially extending the roof. I'm putting some tape on there, and what I'll do is use that to determine how far I want that to be, and then I'll use glue to fasten that down. Okay, now that we've made the necessary repairs on the roof, it's time to start shingling our little cottage here. So I'm using a cereal box for this. I like the cardboard, the sort of the thickness and how easy it is to work with, and it's real cheap and readily available. So I'm just marking 1/2 inch increments on each side so I can make nice straight lines for each row of the shingles. So I've cut out each of the rows right now, and I have alternating patterns of where the ends of the shingles are. So the shingle on top will line up with the center of the shingle below. So they're sort of staggered. If you look at any house, even house right now, they'll be staggered because it's the best way to keep the rain out. So I'm using a V cut to cut out each of the delineations between the shingles, and I'm getting ready to glue them on now. So we start with the bottom and work our way up, just like we'd do if we're doing a real house. And just put one stack on at a time. As you can see, again, as I said earlier, how they sort of line up. You don't want them the same one. You're gonna have like there was, I think, 9 or 10 rows in this project, so you're gonna have like 5 of each sort of variation where the lines are. So I've got the entire roof put on. So what I'm going to do now is just put the crowning pieces on the the very top. The one thing that I noted when I was doing this was I had to come back to the project every half hour, an hour or so, because the natural cardboard, it did not want to stay in that position. It wanted to come up. So once those were good and dry and fastened down, I put a sealing coat over top of it to provide some protection to it and also make it a lot more rigid. Watered down PVA was used to seal the roof. So what we see here is I've black bombed all of the cottage while it was put together as a base using black spray paint, and I'm coming in and doing the rocks first. So I'm starting with my darkest gray that I'm going to be using, putting that in pretty heavily on both sides, and then the next step is going to be doing the timbers. And to do the timbers, I used a dark brown as my base, and the timbers really printed up nicely. I mean, I'm not sure if you ever worked with polymer clay, but once it's baked up and you go to paint it, it really takes paint nicely. Especially if it's been, even if it hasn't been primed, really it does a good job keeping that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be putting black or brown on all of the timbers, and I'm also going to be putting it in the recessed areas here, which is where the stucco is going to be. So that's what you're seeing here. Is just going to do the complete brown and gray. So that's what we have there after the first sort of step is done. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to be coming in here and doing the stucco part. So I'm using like it's like a tannish or a bone color or caramel color that I'm using for that. So I'm coming in and applying it pretty liberally. In hindsight being 2020, I probably would have put that in first because I had to come back and do some cleanup. As you can see, it sort of leaked down over top of the timbers. So I'm coming back and hitting some of the stones with some lighter grays, just some random stones, because if you take a look at stones, they're not all the same color generally. They are going to have some variation. So I'm coming back in with like an ivory and doing a pretty heavy highlight on this, and it looks pretty stark right now, but the last part of this is going to be coming in and putting the wash in, as you see here. So the wash really sort of brings everything back down, and if you apply a little too much wash, just clean your brush off and pull the excess wash off, and that gives you a nice little stucco finish right there. So once that's all said and done, we have our final product here, and I think it really came out nice. I'm really happy with the way that it came out. The one comment that I received that I probably would take into heart if I do something like this again is maybe making the grains on the timber, the bigger timbers there, a little tighter. It almost has like a World of Warcraft cottage feel to it. But one of the main requirements I had, if we remember from the beginning, was making sure that it was something I could assemble and disassemble and store. So you can see that aside from the roof, everything else will store pretty neatly. Here's a close-up of the floorboards in the lower half of the wall section. Those were just done with a, I believe it was 2 or 3 base darker brown and 2 applications of lighter brown dry brushing on top of those. And for the assembly, this was actually done sort of kind of quasi awkwardly. I was trying to work my way around the camera. The camera's to my right here, so the last piece doesn't want to go on too easily because I'm not assembling it directly in front of me. But without too much difficulty, you're able to assemble something that is rock solid. I mean, it will not move. It will not sort of bend. It is a solid piece. And once we put the house over the sort of the foundation that we built and the roof, it gives you an idea of what the entire thing looks like. So we'll take one more look at the top-down look at the inside of the structure. And you can see the floorboards and the floor there, and I think it looks pretty good. So that pretty much wraps up the cottage build here. One of the original requirements I talked about having was making it so I could do some molds of this so I could mass produce them. I'm not sure I'm going to do it with this one, to tell you the truth. If you take a look, you don't want to see too many cottages out there that don't have a chimney. So this was more or less like a proof of concept for me. So I'll probably do something in the not too distant future with a little bit bigger of a cottage maybe, and maybe an inn might be the next thing. But you can see I don't think it looks too much out of place here in a nice woodland setting. So I want to thank you for taking the time to check the video out. I hope you found it informative. I hope it might influence you or motivate you to try to do something similar on your own. So thanks again. If you haven't subscribed, please consider doing so, and take care, and we'll see you in the next video.